All right, friends, it is time. It is the day that I am going to be making my Irish meal based on the British show Father Brown. And I'm going to get started with the Mrs. McCarthy's award-winning strawberry scones. I'm going to get those made first. The stew is going to take quite a bit of time to cook. So I'm going to get the scones cooked and ready, and then I'm going to get the Irish soda bread baked and ready, and then we'll get started on the stew. It has to cook in the oven for about 2.5 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the scones. Now, for Americans, scones is basically biscuits, and this is a sweet biscuit. I'm going to be doing it a slightly different method than the directions. I found the recipe off of an, I can't remember the name of the site. I will have the link for the recipe in the description box below so that I can share the recipe with you and give credit to where I found it. I found it on a website. But anyway, I'm going to be doing the method slightly differently because I've made biscuits a lot of times, and I'm just going to do it kind of the way I always make biscuits. But I'm going to keep the ingredients the same as much as I can, being that I have to be dairy-free, So I'll be substituting just a few of the dairy ingredients for non-dairy versions. So it says, the directions, it says to preheat the oven to 425 degrees, which I have that right now going. And it says, in a food processor, place the flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt and butter, and pulse until it has the consistency of cornmeal. I'm just going to do it in a bowl with my hands. I've got a glove on just because I don't want to get butter underneath my fingernails. So I have 2 cups of flour here in the bowl. Then it calls for 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. I'm gonna have to refill this sugar jar. There's 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. And then it calls for 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of baking powder. So 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon. And then half a teaspoon of salt. And then 5 1/3 tablespoons of butter, or 1/3 of a cup. And it called for Kerrygold. Of course, I'm not going to use Kerrygold. I'm just going to be using my Country Crock plant butter. And right on the packaging, it showed where the 1/3 cup mark was. So I'm going to go ahead and get this diced up, added to the bowl, and then I'm going to mix it till it looks like cornmeal. So I've got that looking like coarse cornmeal. It didn't take very long at all. Now in this cup, it called for 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. Now I don't have buttermilk. This is almond milk, but if you add a splash of lemon juice to it, it kind of curdles it and turns it into like a buttermilk type consistency. Then I've got 1 egg here. I'm going to add it to the milk, and then I'm going to beat this up really well. All right, and then I'm going to pour this into the dry ingredients and mix this really well till it forms a dough. So for whatever reason, this is kind of loose. So I'm going to add some more flour to it. It said I should have had approximately a cup of liquid, which I did. Had maybe a little extra, and it said don't worry about it because the flour from the kneading process will absorb the rest of the liquid. Well, that's a little bit more liquid than, a little soupier than I expected it to be. Okay, that's a little better. All right, that's better. That's more of a biscuit consistency. The other thing I'm going to do differently is they said to roll it out and cut it with a biscuit cutter. I'm not going to do that. I am going to just do like take scoops out and roll it into balls and place it on a baking sheet. That's the way my mom always made biscuits, and so that's what I'm going to do. Now it doesn't say here how many biscuits this should make. I don't think. All right, yeah, it doesn't say. So I'm just going to make as many biscuits as it will make. Alright, so it made 12 scones, and let's see, what does it say now? So it says lightly sprinkle sugar on top of all the scones and bake it in a preheated oven for 12 minutes or until very lightly browned. Now, this dough was way stickier than normal, like a normal biscuit dough is. So if I were to do these again, I would start off with a half a cup of buttermilk instead of 3/4 of a cup. And then if I needed to add liquid, I would, rather than having to add flour. So that's what I would do differently if I made these again. I don't know why they were so sticky. I don't know if it's because I used almond milk instead of regular milk. I don't know. But I was able to form the biscuits, and I think they will make a very tender biscuit. That's my experience with biscuit dough. If it's more sticky and really tender, then the biscuits are light and fluffy. So I'm hoping that's what ends up happening here. So I've got a little bit more sugar, and I'm just going to sprinkle some sugar on the top. And then I'm going to get these in the oven. And then I will finish the process of making, these at the time when we serve them. Because this is basically all you do now. All right, here they are out of the oven. They turned out beautiful. Now they did take about 18 minutes to get golden brown. Recipe said 12 minutes, but every oven is different. And I might have made them a little bit bigger, and the dough was a little bit wetter. So that kind of explains why it took a little bit longer. But they're gorgeous and they smell so good. But I'm just going to go ahead and just leave these here and let them cool completely, and we will finish putting these together, like I said, right before we eat tonight. So the next thing I'm going to work on is the Irish soda bread. All right, for the Irish soda bread, I am using the recipe out of this book. Had this book for a long time, and I've used it a lot. I'm going to go ahead and just hold this here for you. Take a screenshot. I'll move it up. All right, so I saw many different variations and recipes for Irish soda bread in several of my books, and I just decided to go with this one. Now it says it calls for 2 cups of whole wheat flour and 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and then down at the bottom it says under variation, it says you may choose to use 3.5 cups of white flour, eliminating the whole wheat flour. So that is what I am going to do. So I've got my oven preheating to 375 degrees. And I'm going to go ahead in this large bowl, combine the flour, the oats, the baking powder, baking soda, and sugar. So I will be using 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. This is a 2-cup measure. This is a 1.5 cup measure. So I've got the flour in the bowl, and then I'm going to add 1/2 cup of rolled oats, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, one teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 cup of sugar, and then it says to stir until well mixed. And then to the dry ingredients, you're going to add the wet ingredients, which is 1/4 cup of margarine melted, which is my dairy-free margarine that I use. 1 egg beaten. And then I call for 1 3/4 cup of buttermilk. Now I learned my lesson from the scones, and I'm going to start off with 1.5 cups. And this is again almond milk with a splash of lemon juice in it. And of course I will add more milk if it needs it, but I'd rather go a little on the shy side than have the dough be too wet like it was for the scones. So the directions say to stir the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients using a rubber spatula until well blended. So I think that was a good call going with less liquid, because this is definitely not dry. So then at this point is when you mix in the currants, which I don't have any currants. I looked up and it said you could substitute raisins or any other dried fruit, or you could just omit the fruit altogether. So since this is going to be a side dish to a stew, I'm going to go ahead and just omit the fruit. But if I was going to be using this for breakfast or something like that, I would definitely add some dried cranberries to this. I think that would be really, really good. But we're just going to go with just plain today. And it says to go ahead and put the dough out onto a floured surface. And you're going to knead this until it's smooth. This is going to be another one of those sticky doughs for some reason. I don't know, maybe it's because it's so humid outside. You know, sometimes that affects dough. Alright, that came into a nice dough. Still a tiny bit sticky, but that's alright. So now I'm going to go ahead and divide this dough in half. Ordinarily I'd use my bench scraper, but it is in the dishwasher. So I'm just going to use this cleaver here. Cut this in half. And then you form supposed to round it into a ball. I've got this prepared baking sheet here. It's got parchment paper on it. So I'm just gonna put these on the baking pan. And then it says to slash across atop each loaf with a razor. I don't have that. So let me see what I can find that I can slash this with. So I just got a sharp knife. Hopefully this will work. And then it doesn't say to do this, but I've got a tiny bit of that margarine left over that I had melted. So just to use it up, I'm going to go ahead and brush the tops of these with a little bit of this butter. Then you place it in a preheated oven, 375 degrees, and you bake it for about 40 to 45 minutes until it's brown and crusty. All right, the bread is still in the oven, not quite done yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the Irish stew. This is another one where I got off of the internet, and I know where I got this one. I got this from Pioneer Woman, but I will leave the link in the description box below. I am going to try to follow the recipe as closely as I possibly can. There will be obviously some changes. I did not have any beef bouillon concentrate. I thought I had beef broth, but I don't. I have chicken. So I'm going to be using 6 cups of chicken broth, or actually 6 1/4 cups of chicken broth. I'm not going to be using lamb. I am going to be using a pork roast, which I have right here. And it's 2.5 pounds. It called for 2 pounds of lamb, which that's close enough. The other thing I'm going to change is that I don't have a yellow onion. I have a purple onion. I don't think that matters. And I don't have a leek. I looked at the leeks at the store, and they were packaged in huge packages of leek, and it's called for 1 medium. And then I'm like, what am I going to do with the rest of these leeks? So I just decided not to go with it at all. But other than that, I think it's going to be pretty much, I'm going to be following this recipe pretty much the way it is. So I'm going to start, preheat the oven. Well, the oven is already on. The bread is in there. Once the bread comes out, I will turn it down to 325. And I'm going to go ahead. The first thing I need to do is to make the concentrate, which I don't need to do that because I'm going to be using canned chicken broth. And so the next thing I need to do is I need to get this meat cut into 2-inch pieces. So that's what I'm going to do now. Well, that was good timing. I just checked the bread and it is done. So in a Dutch oven or a big heavy bottomed pan, I have the heat on, and I'm going to put about 3 tablespoons of oil in the bottom of this pan. I'm not going to measure, I'm just going to eyeball. And in this, you're going to fry up the meat in small batches until they are browned. So I'm just going to sear this meat in 2 or 3 batches. Don't want to overcrowd the pot. Yeah, probably 2 batches. So while the meat is doing its thing, I'm going to go ahead and get started on some of the vegetables. The next vegetables you're going to need is the onion, the leek if you were going to use the leek, and you need a medium russet potato, peeled and grated. So I'm going to go ahead and get the potato peeled and grated. Alright, so the meat is done. I'm going to lower the heat to medium, and I'm going to add a tablespoon of butter. That's about a tablespoon. So once the butter is melted, I'm going to add onion, the grated potato, starting to turn a little bit brown, but that's okay. And instead of the leek, I'm going to use this cabbage. I'm going to use about half a bag of this slaw mix. So you cook, stirring occasionally, and scraping up any brown bits off the bottom of the pan until the vegetables are soft and translucent. About 5 to 7 minutes. So while that is cooking, I'm going to work on the rest of the vegetables. So I have these little potatoes that I have washed, and I'm going to, because it says 6 medium red potatoes cut into 1.5 inch chunks. So I just have these little baby potatoes, and I'm just going to cut them in half. And there's some yellow ones in there too, which doesn't matter to me. This is just 1 bag of those little petite potatoes. So you're going to have the potatoes, and you're going to have 3 medium carrots peeled and cut into chunks, and 2 medium parsnips peeled and cut into chunks. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these vegetables prepared. Alright, so these vegetables are pretty translucent. So now to this pot, I add the potatoes, the carrots, and the parsnips. And over the top of the vegetables, you sprinkle 1/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. And then you stir it to thoroughly combine. Cook, stirring constantly for 1 minute. Then I add the broth and bay leaves. Stirring well so the flour doesn't clump. So now one thing I've noticed is that they have not had me add any salt to this. Maybe it's because of the bouillon. So I'm not going to add any salt unless it is later on in the directions here. So I'm going to go ahead and add the broth. I did find 1 can of beef broth. That's why this is so dark. But the rest of it's chicken broth. And I use the low sodium kind. Okay, so I've read the rest of the instructions, and you're salted at the end. Salt and pepper it at the end. You just make sure that the flour is all incorporated and not lumpy or anything. And then you add the meat back and any juices that have accumulated. I'm going to add a couple of bay leaves to this. All right, and it says that the broth should cover everything. So I need to add a little bit more broth to this. Still have a little bit of broth left in this pan. It's almost enough. That's pretty good. So now it says if necessary, add a little water, which I did. Bring this to a boil and then cover it and put it in the oven. And my oven's been preheating at 325 degrees. So you cook this for 2 hours or more if needed until the meat is very tender. And then you increase the oven temperature to 400 degrees, you uncover it, give it a good stir, and then let it cook until the sauce has reduced and thickened. So let me get this to a boil and I'll get it in the oven. It's boiling. It's time to go in the oven for 2 hours. Alright, we've had our supper and it was delicious, and now I'm going to assemble the dessert for everyone. So I'm going to take one of these scones, or biscuits as we call them, split it in half, and then I'm going to take some really good quality strawberry preserves. Oh, I'm going to have Travis open that. So actually, Olivia was able to get it open. So I'm going to kind of stir it up a little, make it more spreadable. And then you spread some on either side. And then I'm going to take some strawberries that Olivia diced up for me today and put a little bit of sugar on. You want a little bit of sugar on them so that they'll have some, juice. And then for the guys, I've got this whipped cream. Now, originally, like if you lived in England, they would use what's called clotted cream, which I have absolutely no idea what that is. But we don't have that here. So there's that. And then put the top on it. And there is Mrs. McCarthy's award-winning strawberry scones. I'll fix one for Olivia and I using this Cool Whip. And this dessert was absolutely delicious. It reminded me very much of my mother's strawberry shortcake. She would make it kind of in a biscuit form, but she would always add nutmeg, I think, to the dough. But it reminded me very much of my mother's strawberry shortcake. And the stew was so good. It was so luscious. I don't know if it was the shredded potato that caused the gravy to be so thick and rich, but it was absolutely delicious. Now, I'm not going to lie, it was very time consuming to make. This was an all-day event creating this meal. Would I make this stew again? Yes. Would I make it again very often? No. I would make it for a special occasion, or if it was a nice cold winter's day and I didn't have anything else better to do, I would definitely create this meal again. But I'm one of those people who likes to get food on the table quick and no fuss, no muss, And so this was a big deal for me to spend the entire day creating this meal. The Irish soda bread was delicious, extremely easy. I will definitely be making this again. You can whip this together in an hour, and that's including the bake time, which was about 45 minutes. It was super easy, very delicious. It was an enriched dough because of the egg. And I would definitely make it again using some dried cranberries. So I will definitely be adding the Irish soda bread into our rotation, especially in the winter months. All right, friends, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comment section below if you plan on making any of these recipes. I highly recommend all three of them. It was a fun day. It was a day that I felt like cooking and spending the day in the kitchen. If cooking is your cup of tea and you really enjoy it, you will really enjoy creating this meal. But if you're like me and you don't really enjoy cooking that much, save this for a special occasion. But anyway, friends, thanks so much for watching, and we will talk to you all later. Bye-bye, friends.